Good morning. Today's topic is protein analysis of urine. An introduction. Urine analysis is the most commonly used diagnostic test in modern medicine. It is informative as well as it is a non-invasive diagnostic tool which is readily accessible to the clinician. Hippocrates was the one who first identified the urine as the ultrafiltrate of blood, and he wrote about the urine examination in early 400 BC. However, the modern era is composed of reagent strip or dipstick, which began in 1956, and it has been constantly improved. Nowadays, in the modern lab, we are using reagent strip. The routine urine examination like Benedict's or heat and coagulation test is not performed. So it has almost replaced the reagent strip. The reagent strip has almost replaced the older methods. So when to perform urine examination? In case of evaluating acute and chronic kidney disease, namely glomerulonephritis, nephrotic syndrome, pyelonephritis, and renal failure. So in nephrotic syndrome is one of the most common cause for proteinuria. Then in order to monitor the course of established kidney disease. And in case of asymptomatic patient, to clarify the incidental findings which is noted on urine dipstick analysis. Then in case of detection of urinary tract infection and detection and management of metabolic disorders like diabetes mellitus, detection of pregnancy, detection of plasma cell dyscrasias, namely multiple myeloma. Name some plasma cell dyscrasias, multiple myeloma, Waldenström macroglobulinemia, and some other conditions. So what are the methods of specimen collection? So it is broadly divided into random specimen collection, morning sample, clean catch midstream, 24 hours urine sample collection, postprandial, and suprapubic aspirate. So random specimen can be collected at any time. There is no specific time which is allocated to it, and its main purpose is protein screening. Then morning sample is first urine in the morning is collected, because it is most concentrated and it is particularly useful for pregnancy test as well as microscopic test. Then clean catch midstream urine. In this you have to discard first few ml and you have to collect the rest of the urine. It is particularly useful for culture. Then 24 hours urine sample. In this case you have to collect the entire day and night sample, and on the next day the first sample is collected. It is used for quantitative and qualitative analysis of substances. Then postprandial, 2 hours after meal, the sample is collected. It is useful to determine the glucose in diabetic monitoring. In case of suprapubic aspirate, needle aspiration is done, and it is main purpose is to obtain the sterile urine. So midstream urine generally lessens the contamination from the vaginal secretion or menstrual flow, whereas in infants, sterile wipe may stimulate voiding reflex. Hence, collection bags can be attached and a cotton ball in a diaper is used for quick collection of urine for dipstick testing. So, when is the ideal to do the urine examination? So, urine sample must be tested within 2 hours of collection to get the correct result. If not so, if the examination is not done within 2 hours, what are all the changes which occurs in the urine? That we will see in next slide. That is, changes occurs in urine which occurs at room temperature is, first is increase in pH, which is mainly due to production of ammonia. Then formation of crystals, which is due to precipitation of phosphates and calcium. Then loss of ketone bodies because they are volatile. Then decrease in glucose, which is mainly due to glycolysis and utilization of glucose by cells and bacteria. Finally, oxidation of bilirubin to biliverdin causing false negative test. Then oxidation of urobilinogen to urobilin causing false negative test for urobilinogen. Bacterial proliferation, finally disintegration of cellular elements, especially in alkaline and hypotonic urine. So what you have to do, these are all the changes which occurs if the urine examination has not been done within 2 hours of collection. So if you are not able to do the urine examination within 2 hours, then what you have to do? So you have to preserve the urine sample. What are the methods of preservation? Here comes the answer. Like refrigeration at 4 to 6 degrees Celsius, in which the preservation can be done up to 8 hours, Then by hydrochloric acid for adrenaline, noradrenaline, vanillin, mandelic acid, and steroids. Then toluene, which act as a physical barrier for bacteria and air. Thymol, which is most commonly used, it inhibits bacteria as well as fungi. And finally, formalin for the preservation of formed elements. So in urine examination, physical examination has been previously covered. Now we will be covering the chemical examination. Under the chemical examination, we will be seeing in detail regarding the protein and ketone bodies. So proteins in urine. Normally the kidneys excrete scant amount of protein in urine, which is up to 150 mg per 24 hours. What are all the proteins which can be excreted in urine? This includes albumin, TAM-Hasfol protein, secretory IgA, then some of the proteins from tubular epithelial cells, leukocytes, and other despermated cells. So what is called as proteinuria? Up to 150 mg can be excreted normally in urine. If it exceeds greater than 150 mg per 24 hours, then you have to label it as proteinuria. So how will you quantify proteinuria? Quantitatively, analyzing the amount of protein excreted over a 24-hour period. Repeat measurements must be necessary to decide if the proteinuria is intermittent or persistent. So this is how you will classify proteinuria quantitatively. Heavy proteinuria means it will be greater than 4 gram per day. If it is in case of moderate proteinuria, it is 1 to 4 gram per day. In case of minimal proteinuria, less than 1 gram per day. So what are all the causes for heavy proteinuria? It is characteristically seen with nephrotic syndrome. As I have said before, nephrotic syndrome is one of the classical examples for heavy proteinuria. Malaria, malignant hypertension, toxemia of pregnancy, drugs like penicillamine, heavy metals like gold, mercury, amyloidosis, sickle cell disease, renal transplant rejection, and rarely primary antiphospholipid syndrome. Now we will see what are the causes for moderate proteinuria. Nephrosclerosis, multiple myeloma, toxic nephropathies, presence of calculi, malignant and inflammatory conditions of lower urinary tract. Then we will see the cause for minimal proteinuria. Chronic pyelonephritis, nephrosclerosis, chronic interstitial nephritis, polycystic disease, medullary cystic disease, postural proteinuria, and transient proteinuria. Qualitative categories of proteinuria can be done by electrophoretic separation of urine proteins. The most two common types were glomerular pattern and tubular pattern. Next, we will see in detail about the glomerular pattern and tubular pattern. So, glomerular pattern, there will be heavy proteinuria which will be exceeding greater than 4 gram per day. Loss or reduction of fixed and negative charges on the basement membrane is one of the most common cause for glomerular pattern. So generally the basement membrane will be having the fixed and negative charges, and these proteins will also have a negative charges. So when these two negative charges interact, they will repel and hence they won't be passed in the urine. If there is loss or reduction of the fixed and negative charges, then ultimately these proteins will escape via the basement membrane and it will enter the urine. So this is the basic mechanism for the glomerular pattern. So loss of serum albumin, antithrombin, transferrin, alpha-1 acid glycoprotein, alpha-1 antitrypsin will occur. Selective proteinuria generally indicates greater damage to the glomerulus, especially with membranous nephropathy and proliferative glomerular nephritis. So what you will see in tubular pattern, the excretion of low molecular weight proteins, which are generally reabsorbed by the proximal renal tubules, will be excreted in diseased conditions of tubules. Name some conditions. Those includes Fanconi syndrome, cystinosis, Wilson's disease, pyelonephritis, and renal transplant rejection. So what are all the Bence-Jones proteins? They are nothing but monoclonal immunoglobulins which is synthesized by neoplastic plasma cells. It is excreted in urine because of its low molecular weight as well as high concentration. Generally, these Bence-Jones protein will precipitate between 40 to 60 degrees Celsius and the precipitate disappears on further heating to 85 to 100 degrees Celsius. When cooled, the reappearance of the precipitate will occur. Okay, this is the basic mechanism for the identification of Benn's protein by simple heating process. However, the ideal method is nothing but the electrophoresis. So, what are all the conditions which is associated with Benn's proteinuria? It is commonly associated with multiple myeloma, macroglobulinemia, and malignant lymphomas. As I said before, the best method for detection of Benn's protein is electrophoresis and immunofixation electrophoresis. However, the incidence of Benn's proteins in multiple myeloma is estimated as 50 to 80%. So, this is the protein electrophoresis. Here you can see the hike of albumin, alpha 1, alpha 2, beta and gamma. In multiple myeloma or when there is an excretion of Benn's proteins, in the gamma area there will be a spike. So this is the finding for multiple myeloma or Benn's proteins. Microalbuminuria. The presence of albumin urine above the normal range but below the detectable range, which means there will be albumin in urine above the normal range, but it cannot be detected by the routine dipstick method. The levels are ranging from 30 to 300 mg per liter. It is an indicator of yearly and possibly reversible glomerular damage. And in diabetic patients, microalbuminuria is an independent risk factor for renal mortality. Also, it is more prevalent in hypertensive patients. Hence, it acts as an important indicator for both diabetes as well as for the hypertensive subjects. So, what are all the causes for microalbuminuria? It can be broadly classified into non-modifiable and modifiable. Under non-modifiable, race and ethnicity plays an important factor, followed by male gender, old age, and low birth weight. And under the modifiable factors, the well-proven modifiable factors are diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and smoking, and likely proven to be high salt diet, high protein diet, hyperlipidemia, fever, exercise, congestive heart failure, urinary tract infection, and vaginal discharge. So, standard urinalysis dipstick can detect urine albumin which is greater than 300 mg, but microalbuminuria cannot be detected because the range falls between 30 to 300 mg. Hence, it can be accurately measured by either ELISA, RIA, or nephelometry. So now we are moving on to the test for protein. What are all the chemical tests for protein? First comes heat and acetic acid test. The basic principle behind it is proteins are denatured and coagulated upon heating to give the cloudy white precipitate. So you have to take the urine up to 3/4 of the test tube and then you have to heat the upper part of the test tube alone because the lower part acts as the control. Once you see like this way white precipitate, you have to add acetic acid. Generally, you are adding acetic acid to differentiate between the protein and phosphate because both the proteins and phosphate will produce this cloudiness. So you have to differentiate with 1% acetic acid to confirm it is proteinuria. So this is the first stage. It is absent. There is no any cloudiness. Here mild, moderate. So as the concentration of the protein in the urine increases, the precipitate also increase in density. Next, we are moving on to sulfosalicylic acid test. Its principle is addition of sulfosalicylic acid to the urine will causes the formation of precipitate and it can detect about 5 to 10 mg per day. Here also the remarks that is 1 plus, 2 plus, 3 plus, the grading increases as the concentration of the protein in the urine increase. Next, we are moving on to Heller's test. The principle is strong acid causes denaturation of the precipitated proteins. And the method employed is you have to take 2 ml of concentrated nitric acid in a test tube and you have to add urine drop by the side of the tube. The appearance of the white ring at the junction indicates the presence of protein. Then comes our modern reagent strip method. And the principle here is the reagent area of the strip is coated with bromophenol blue indicator and it is buffered to an acid pH which changes color in presence of proteins. So the reagent strip test is mainly reactive to albumin. However, you can get the false negative test for Benn's proteins, myoglobin and hemoglobin. So this is the method which is actively employed in all the modern laboratories. You have to be thorough with the principle. Then comes the Isbach's albinometer. Here you have to fill the albinometer with urine up to mark U. Then you have to add the reagent, that is the Isbach reagents up to mark R. Then you have to stop at the tube and you have to let it stand for 24 hours. Then you have to take the reading from the level of precipitation and it divided by 10 to get the percentage. Then nephelometry. What is the principle for nephelometry? When electromagnetic radiation strikes on a particle in solution, some of the light will be absorbed by the particle, while some will be transmitted through the solution, while some will be scattered or reflected. This amount of light scattered is proportional to the concentration of insoluble particle. So, depending upon this scattered light will alone be measured by nephelometry. So, what is the light which is measured by the nephelometer? It is neither the absorbed nor the reflected, only the scattered light will be measured by the nephelometer. So what are all the clinical applications of nephelometry? This plays an important role in the determination of immunoglobulins in serum and other biological fluids, in determination of concentration of individual serum proteins like hemoglobin, haptoglobin, C-reactive protein, albumin, by using antibodies specific for each protein, and for determination of size and number of particles. So this is the nephelometer and this is the outer part and inner part of the nephelometer. Now we are moving on to ketonuria. So ketone bodies are nothing but they are intermediate products of fat metabolism, which includes acetone, acetoacetic acid and beta hydroxybutyric acid. The causes for ketonuria are starvation, eclampsia, diabetic ketoacidosis, prolonged vomiting, and von Wieck's disease. What are the tests for ketonuria? Rothera's test, Gerard's test, heat test, and dipstick test. However, the Rothera's test, you must be thorough because this was the experiment you have to perform in your lab. You have to take 4 ml of urine in a test tube. Then you have to add few crystals of sodium nitroprusside and you have to saturate the urine with ammonium sulfate by mixing vigorously. After that, you have to add a few drops of liquid ammonia along the wall of the tube. Thus, the purple ring develops. If there is purple ring, then there is the presence of ketone bodies. Then what is the principle behind the dipstick method? Here, the alkaline nitroprusside becomes purple with acetone or acetoacetic acid. It is a sensitive and it must be performed in a fresh urine. These are all my references and thank you.